taken with the intention of contributing towards a coalition. And then when those coalitions take place, those votes are used irresponsibly in the manner in which coalitions are managed. I think as well it's going to be very important that we hear from our colleagues in Johannesburg about the important work that was being done in this municipality so we can contextualize that loss, but also the way forward for ActionSA, because we are still in government, in coalition, and there are important questions being asked of us as an organization. But let me start with the unfortunate business of having to address what can only be described as pathological dishonesty over the course of the last few days. ActionSA has watched as we have been labeled somehow as the people who collapsed this coalition government. And this has been the allegations made by the leader of the Democratic Alliance and many of his colleagues, despite the fact that at ActionSA, at every single turn, we have voted with the coalition, even when we were in disagreement with the approach taken. This dishonesty is deliberate. It is designed to distract from the question of how this coalition collapsed, and that is why we feel it necessary to come here today to set that particular record straight. So let me do that now. On the 31st of August, a council meeting took place at which the Speaker, Vasco da Gama, was removed. He was not removed because of the treachery of any political party, but because individual councillors from a handful of parties were induced by the ANC to vote out the Speaker. When that vacancy arose, ActionSA, along with other political parties, immediately engaged one another, including the DA. There was no secrecy here, to say that there is an imbalance in the coalition in the city of Johannesburg, that one party governs the mayor, the speaker, and the chief whip of this municipality. And if we're going to have effective and stable coalition government, that imbalance has to be addressed. It is very important for me to remind you, because I know if you say a day is a long time in politics, well, 10 months is a very, very long time indeed. But 10 months ago, it was parties like ActionSA, the coalition partners of Current, and even the EFF, who had to put the DA into government in these municipalities against their will. You will recall coalition talks were collapsed 2 days before the inaugural council meeting at which those positions were elected. And the DA's position was that they were going to go it alone. And what go it alone meant was put forward their own candidates separately from a coalition, and the voting system in municipalities would have produced an ANC outcome. You may even recall a mayoral candidate in Ekurhuleni who resigned her council seat to return to parliament, only to have her number 2 elected mayor, if you would like to recall that event. And the reason why I say that is because a lot has been said of the story, a deal is a deal, and you must stick to the negotiation, etc., etc. But the very important point to make here is that the negotiation took place after the coalition had collectively installed DA people into the positions of mayor, speaker, and chief whip. In Tshwane, the coalition even went and reversed that, and you will remember that a DA speaker resigned, and a coalition speaker who is a COPE speaker, who's currently there now, was put in their place. So when we say a deal is a deal, deals are negotiated by political parties. But the same could not happen in the city of Johannesburg, because the numbers in the city of Johannesburg are far more precarious, as we have seen very recently in technicolor detail. But in addition to that, the secret ballot problem of electing a new speaker would have been a problem in Johannesburg. So the coalition had to say, it is an imbalance, but we can't do anything about it. And a negotiated deal was signed off in December. When the vacancy arose on the 31st of August, that is why it was said we need to correct that imbalance. And a lot of people very understandably are becoming fed up about this conversation being all about positions. And I can understand why they feel that way. But let's make something very, very clear. This isn't just about positions. It's about stability. Because when you have a coalition government, which is run by one party, and the role of every other party is simply just to provide support, you're not going to have a stable coalition government. And that is why, in ActionSA's view, for the past 10 months, the reputation arising from our coalition in Johannesburg has not been about our service delivery agenda and our fight against corruption. It has been of instability, of collapsed meetings, and chaos. And that is something that ActionSA was very concerned about. So when we made the proposal to say that we believe an IFP speaker should be nominated into that position. ActionSA firstly had no benefit in that discussion. We sought no position whatsoever. What we sought was 4 more years of government so that the service delivery taking place could continue to take place for the next 4 years. It is critical to understand that the change agenda for residents is a function of 2 things. It's about the quality of services and the length of time in which those services are being delivered. And a quality service delivery program over 9 months that we have had cannot fix the problems in the city of Johannesburg, and it cannot reverse the decades of the legacy of ANC government. That is why it would need the full term of office to fix those problems, and that is why ActionSA took this position. And this position wasn't adopted in secret. It was notoriously done in front of all of our coalition partners. In fact, the very first people we called about this proposal were in fact the Democratic Alliance. And it didn't take place on the floor of council with a couple of hours' notice. You will recall that the meeting at which the speaker was removed was on the 31st of August, and the meeting now at which the new speaker was elected was on the 28th of September. Nearly a month for that conversation to take place. And coalition partners engaged the Democratic Alliance at length. And it was one of the very few times where all coalition partners were united in saying, this is what needs to happen. And they were united because they could see the problems of instability. They could see the fact that the IFP was underrepresented in the coalition. And they could see that 2 political parties in Johannesburg, the IFP and the PA, are underrepresented, and they form the 15-vote core bloc that will determine the future of which set of coalitions govern the city of Johannesburg. And if any of you doubt that, please look at the events of last week to substantiate that particular claim, because that is precisely what happened. And the simple truth, in our opinion, is that if that advice had been heeded, there would still be a coalition government in place in the city of Johannesburg today. And the service delivery successes that you will hear from my colleague Funzi Ngobeni in a moment would still be continuing. And we wouldn't need to be talking to the residents of Johannesburg about the tragedy that has befallen their city. Now, it is very important to address this whole narrative about breaches of coalition agreements, etc., because that's become a new and bizarre term. And I need to make one more thing clear. The coalition agreement has been renegotiated before. The original coalition agreement was signed on the 15th of December 2021. On the 22nd of February 2022, the coalition agreement was amended. And it was amended to bring the Patriotic Alliance into the coalition. Parties like ActionSA gave up positions in Ekurhuleni. Our MMC of Health and Social Development had to relinquish that position, where she was doing excellent work to the benefit of those residents, and she had to hand that position over to the Patriotic Alliance. And we did so as an organization, despite the fact that it's not easy, but because it was the right thing to do for the sake of the stability of the coalition. Now, if you can renegotiate coalitions then, why can you not renegotiate coalitions now? Even beyond that, the coalition agreement that is being referred to by the DA leader as being uneditable and set in stone, and that is merely a breach of coalition just to refer to it, is a concept that becomes laughable when you see that the coalition agreement itself offered the position of the impact chairperson to the IFP. And the IFP never took up that position for a variety of very complicated KZN-related matters. But you cannot in one breath refer to the sanctity of a coalition agreement and the fact that it can never be renegotiated when it doesn't suit you. But when it does suit you, it's entirely fine to renegotiate it as and when you please. It doesn't work that way. And the reason why particularly it cannot work that way is that coalitions and the agreements that deal with them must ultimately serve the residents of those municipalities. That has to be the basis for a coalition or any agreement. And if you cannot look at a coalition agreement and ask yourself, how can we use the current set of circumstances to strengthen this coalition, to stabilize this coalition, and to ensure the good service delivery arising from this coalition doesn't last 10 months, but lasts the full 5-year term of office, then I think they've lost the point about what coalitions are actually about. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I believe the events of recent have been characterized from an ActionSA standpoint, and it was very important that we did. Because as I've indicated, the residents of Johannesburg, while they are undoubtedly fed up with the backwards and forwards on these conversations, they need to know why this happened. They need to know why this tragedy has befallen their city, so that in future they can understand how political parties will use their votes in a responsible or an irresponsible manner. And with that said, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Funzi Ngobeni, our caucus leader in the City of Johannesburg, and I think he's going to talk to you a little bit about the price of those decisions in terms of the service delivery agenda that was taking place. Thank you very much. I think if you just give us a minute to move all the infrastructure for us.
All right. No, thank you very much, National Chair, and good morning to members of the media. Good morning to the residents of Johannesburg who are watching this this session, where they are. Yeah, as Michael has indicated, I think my role here is to just indicate and speak on this tragedy that has happened from the service delivery perspective. As you know, we've got 44 councillors in the City of Joburg, and we've got 3 MMCs, former MMCs now, and I'm one of them. The program of service delivery, from a perspective of a multi-party government, was starting to gain some shape. I think, as you all know, we have been in government now for 9 months. Almost 6 of those 9 months was under the ANC budget. We only crafted and approved our own budget in June, and July it was implemented. And among many of the issues that had to be dealt with by that budget included some very strategic issues. One of it's a motion that we tabled in the City of Johannesburg that spoke about the Eskom and City Power matter. For the people of Soweto, we had made a commitment during our campaign that as soon as we get into government, we will address this issue. And as ActionSA, we even made sure that there is a motion that is adopted by Council that will ensure that at the end of the day, before we leave at least this municipality after 5 years, we will have ensured that the residents are free from the abuse of Eskom. And that was still in progress. And something that we were hoping that we'll see it through as the government. But now that we are in opposition, we will have to make sure that we push the current government in implementing that resolution. Another very important issue that we were driving in the City of Johannesburg was the informal trading policy. I think most of you will remember that this policy was left at abeyance by the previous government for a longest time. And it's one of the reasons why the inner city, it's in the state that it is at the moment. So we brought in this policy championed by our colleague, Councillor Mbundu. And we were on our way on implementing it now in October, ensuring that all the informal traders are getting their permits, and we are able to now normalize situation in the inner city. But coupled to that, it was public safety. Former MMC Councillor Tembe was leading a fight against crime in the City of Johannesburg. I think most of you will attest that the inner city was starting to look better in terms of safety because he had deployed close to 1,000 police officers in the inner city. And they were starting to dealing with crime that was happening and the unlawfulness that was happening in the inner city. Over and above that, he has started deploying some of our JMPD in the regions which are underserved, like Soweto, in El Dorado Park. He was already dealing with the situation that was arising there. So there was a lot of work that we were doing. But I must be honest and also acknowledge that we were not working alone. We were working with an executive mayor, Palatse, who was leading us as a mayor. And although we had political differences with her on certain matters, but she managed to hold us together as a team. We managed to deal with a number of transversal issues with our colleagues in other departments where we were not in charge, like Joburg Water, City Power, and other departments. And we were making progress in terms of getting this coordination around service delivery, continuing. And I think it's at this moment, from us as ActionSA, that we salute her and thank her for the cooperation that he provided to us. We know that it was not easy. In her party, people were opposing her for working with us. In some instances, when we introduced Arisebetseng as a program to deal with the backlog of potholes and traffic lights that were left unattended for many, many months because of the COVID-19 situation. As you know, JRA was not an essential service provider, and our general workers who stayed at home for 2 years. And when we came back, we had to bring them back so that we can be able to start dealing with the backlog. We managed to fix close to 112,000 potholes in the city of Johannesburg. It's scratching the surface if you look at it, because the challenges are huge. The infrastructure backlog, it's huge. Most of our bridges are in a bad state, but we're starting to make that progress, and we're starting to get the processes in place that will ensure that departments are working together in ensuring that we move forward. There's a lot of work that was still awaiting us in the city of Joburg. Let me just make an example with the insourcing of security guard. I think most of you know that President Mashaba insourced security guards when he was the mayor. But most of those security guards, in fact, all of them have not been professionalized and really being taken into the city and then being given the resources, the tools of trade, and so forth. This budget that was approved in July was going to do exactly that. So those are some of the things, and there's a list of them that we can mention, that in fact we are saying the residents of the city of Johannesburg are the losers in the whole thing. But as Michael was indicating, we hope that from our point of view, when we'll be sitting in the opposition, we'll make sure that all these commitments, that this budget that we approved, that it's used efficiently, so that we can be able to ensure that the residents get what they deserve. So it doesn't end here. The residents must know that we're still here as ActionSA, and the Fabulous 44 will continue from the opposition side, ensuring that their interests are being served in the city of Johannesburg. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you don't mind, you're going to have to give me a minute to pass over all the infrastructure.
Okay. Save the best for last. Well, thank you. Okay. Yes, I think as a point of departure, we want to really appreciate and pay a special recognition to former Mayor Palatse for the role that she played in leading this fantastic team of a coalition. I have since given her a call on behalf of our party to check on her, on her well-being, and just communicate our sympathies to her and wish her well. But equally, it's important for us to indicate at this moment that there is no longer a coalition in the city of Johannesburg. All parties, ourselves included and the DA, are now individual parties. We note the process that the Democratic Alliance has started insofar as the litigation and them challenging it. They have not directly engaged us, we note it. We have accepted our new reality, that we are opposition. And we are going to be a formidable opposition. We are going to ensure that the budget that has been approved, that we've made inputs in, is effected. We are going to hold the executive to account. We are going to do our parts. So we've decided to place the residents ahead of everything else and ensure that they get the services that they need. And I think it's also quite important to emphasize the point that the DA's simple logic cannot hold any waters. You can't accuse people for exercising a provision in the agreement to amend the agreement when they do so that they are breaking or violating the agreement. It's a very simple logic, this. So for them, actually, for us contesting a view and coming up with a different proposal in the relevant platform can be characterized as us reneging on an agreement is quite laughable. We made a proposal. Majority of the parties in the coalition national management agreed to the proposal. The DA is the only one that did not agree to our proposal of having IFP take the speaker position for the reasons we've advanced, that we need to have power sharing in a coalition that creates stability. We are not there subservient to the will and the whim of the DA. We're not there to help DA govern. No one won. There's no majority party there. So all of us are the same. So it's important that the coalition appreciates these dynamics and also acts in the best interest of stabilizing our coalition by making sure that members' participation is deepened, that you don't have the same party occupying the key leadership positions, that being the speaker, the chief whip, and the executive mayor. And when the opportunity arose, we made a proposal. The proposal was not accepted, and we accepted that it was not accepted. And we committed and confirmed that we will vote for a DA candidate, as we did, and the DA candidate subsequently lost. And the PA is the one that did not vote for the DA candidate. So this loose and clumsy allegation that we caused it by depositing a proposal is quite laughable, because we are a different party, we hold different views, and we went there to persuade them. We are unable to persuade them because, in their words, they felt that it is their position. You see, once you are in a coalition and you believe that it is your position, then you're no longer acting in the best interest of the coalition. You're now protecting what they believe is their position. They had a simple choice to make, and they did not appreciate the moment that was before them. The moment was, do you choose power, position, or do you choose stabilizing the coalition and ensuring that this lasts for the next 4 years? And they chose power and position, and they lost everything. Ekurhuleni is eminent. It's a minority government in Ekurhuleni. We understand that the EFF and ANC have an agreement in place, and in the foreseeable future, Ekurhuleni is going to go. We did warn this early this year that Ekurhuleni is in a precarious situation. Our warnings were not heeded too, because we felt it's important to start speaking to other parties to strengthen Ekurhuleni and ensure that we can govern for a longer period of time. So if the DA really think that one position was enough for them to lose and destabilize government, it has really assisted us as ActionSA to open our eyes, because now there's some questions we need to answer as ActionSA. And that part our national chair is going to speak to, because the situation we have found ourselves in, the instability in these coalitions, has really brought some serious consideration to our doorstep sooner than what we would have expected. But where we stand as ActionSA, we are clear. In Johannesburg, there's no longer a coalition. There's a new executive. We must accept. We must move on. We've moved on. But we've moved on. And we propose to everybody else to accept Shem that it's gone. Let's go be opposition. Let's hold them to account. Let's demonstrate that at least ActionSA will be able to reinvent itself in a new role that will make sense and represent the residents of Johannesburg. So we are quite clear with where we are going. And I think it would be important for us in Johannesburg to take a small break from the DA. We don't want to be speaking with them for now. We must cool down. Let's focus on Ekurhuleni and City of Tshwane. But this one, it's not them, it's us. We want a break. So we just want a small break in Johannesburg so we can cool down and be able to reflect deeply about what has happened and what will happen next. Thank you so much.
So I understand that there is a huge level of interest in terms of the question, what now? And I can understand why. The one thing I will ask for the patience of members of the media, residents of Joburg and South Africans at large, is that these events took place on Friday. It's just been 3 days. And ActionSA has to get together to determine a way forward. There's not been a lot of time for us to be able to do so. And what I can confirm to you is that ActionSA Senate will be convening itself during the course of this week. It is a particularly serious meeting. We are typically an organization that operates virtually for meetings, and that is just simply because, unlike those represented in Parliament, we have to operate on a shoestring budget. That's why so many of you are crowded into such a small space. My apologies again. But part of that meeting is going to have to reconsider ActionSA's involvement and position when it comes to coalitions. I think what we are starting to experience is that when we are part of coalitions where a political party does not demonstrate its maturity in leading those coalitions, and it doesn't see the need to co-govern, and it doesn't see the need to share power, that coalitions are unstable. And ActionSA has to ask ourselves the question, how do we see our involvement in coalitions going forward? Because if our involvement in coalitions going forward is to be part of coalitions that are horribly unstable and that fall apart after 10 months and cause despair in the lives of residents, then this is something we genuinely have to review. And this is the question that ActionSA will be considering. Our organization has very recently returned from a study tour to Denmark. Denmark is a country that has not had, they've had one majority government in the last 42 years, and it failed. Coalition governments succeed in Denmark. And one of the reasons why coalition governments succeed is that the most important ism in Denmark is not socialism, liberalism, or communism. It's pragmatism. Political parties in Denmark come together around service delivery agendas and around the question of stability, and they create an agenda that they go ahead and they implement. And I think in many ways there's something in there for South Africans to learn, and I think for political parties in particular. And this is part of what I believe will be central in our ActionSA Senate's agenda when we meet during the course of this week. I think if you would bear with me for now, it would be very difficult to say anything more than that before the Senate meets, just primarily because it's the Senate that needs to make these kind of perspectives, and simply not things that can be communicated before they've been discussed at length. But I think from my side, thank you very, very much. It is always appreciated that members of the media come to ensure that these stories are told. And if I may, hand over to our national spokesperson to facilitate any questions that may arise. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael. Welcome, everybody. I'm Lerato Ngobeni. I'm opening questions now. I'll take 3 at a time, and I'll take the round as much as is exhaustive. Please tell us who you are and which media house you represent, and we will note your question. For members of the media who may be watching online, please do send us your questions via our cell phone. I think everybody's got my cell phone number at this point. If you do not, please communicate in the chat function online. All right, I will take this hand, and I'll take the other hand, and I'll take you also. All right, please go ahead. Do we have a microphone, or are you audible? Okay, great. Go ahead.
It's Yanda Ngobo from Newsroom Africa. My first question to the leadership here is whether or not you agree with the sentiment, and I think you've alluded to it, but maybe perhaps for clarity, that the removal of DA Mayor Mpho Phalatse as a result of interference maybe from the national leadership, and that perhaps if Mpho Phalatse and her caucus here were left to their own devices, we wouldn't have found ourselves in this situation as citizens and residents of Johannesburg. And this is linked to my second question on, on coalition governments being able to work as a result of political maturity. Some could maybe argue that ActionSA, instead of actually not going to last week's council, you could have gone and made sure you saved Mpho Phalatse and dealt with your issues with the DA within the parameters of that coalition agreement. Why didn't you try and fight within, as opposed to the situation where you're now in the official opposition benches? So, in fact, unintended consequences as a result of you not going to that council sitting. Thank you.
It's Ndayezona Tshwane from Power FM News. The talks that you guys had prior to the the election of the new speaker, from a DA's point of view, who was leading those talks? what actually went down? What was it that was said when you guys were negotiating this issue of having the IFP take up that position? Secondly, Bongani, you say your relationship with the DA is you need to review it, but you've accepted the fate here in Johannesburg. But the thing is, you still have a relationship with them in other parts of, in other municipalities. And as you rightfully mentioned, in Ekurhuleni, literally, there, you can't see what happened in Joburg. It can literally go just like that. Are you having conversations around the two municipalities where you still have a relationship with the DA, or you have just let it go completely and you're saying right now we should, whether Tshwane or Ekurhuleni goes doesn't really matter? Thank you.
I'm Ekurhuleni at the start. For Dr. Beaumont, I would like to know, ActionSA has put itself in a precarious situation where let's say they wouldn't work with the ANC. Are you now willing to consider how you negotiate and how you, use or really participate in coalitions? And then to that way, everyone by now knows that Helen runs a DA like it's a shebeen, and it has become known that Mpo was routinely excluded from meetings. Were you also excluded from meetings? And are you sympathizing with black people still remaining in the dungeons of the DA? Thank you.
Should we take them? Okay, Kule.
Right, this is Ekurhuleni City Jones, ENCA. Mr. Boloyo, are you looking at having a conversation or talks with the PA? Because I understood that when they broke out, essentially what had happened is that it killed the whole, collapsed the whole coalition formation in Johannesburg. Has Kenny Kunene come forward to say, can you fix this going forward, or it's done, it's not happening anymore? Right.
All right, let me see if there's one more hand or we can take answers. Go ahead.
How do you see Johannesburg municipality under the ANC?
Yeah. Okay, please go ahead.
From the citizen.
Say that again.
From the citizen.
Okay.
I just want to find out, following Dumian's question, if the ANC coalition with the EFF had to offer some of your councillors who have already been MMCs in the municipality, would the DA consider taking that if they are saying that we are willing to serve residents of Johannesburg? Would it be about we don't want to work with the ANC, or we want to serve residents of Johannesburg?
Did you mean would ActionSA, not
Yes.
the DA?
So, ActionSA.
Okay. Yeah, just okay, we'll take responses now.
Okay, I'll deal with the easy questions. I'll leave the more difficult ones to my colleagues. You're quite correct. We still have a coalition agreement in City of Tshwane and City of Ekurhuleni. It's a known fact that the City of Ekurhuleni is a minority government. The ANC and EFF put together is enough to change government there, and we believe it's the next municipality they are going to. We don't believe, we have left it to the senior party in the coalition, the DA, to advise us on a strategy of retaining Ekurhuleni, because they are the senior party there, right? That's what they keep telling us. But as reality stands, our numbers put together in Ekurhuleni mean nothing. The two parties can take Ekurhuleni. Then there's a conversation of City of Tshwane, where there's two investigations pending on Mayor Randall, which are being done by the Coalition National Management Group. So the end of October is the prescription of that period within which a report on investigation should have been completed and subsequently sent to the National Coalition Group for applying its mind. So we are waiting nicely for that, for the outcome of those two in Tshwane. So in Tshwane, we are still in a coalition. We've raised our issues. Now we're waiting for a process that has been agreed to. But Ekurhuleni, we must also confront reality And we've prepared our guys, at least this past weekend, I've prepared our structures in Ekurhuleni of what is going to happen. So they must not be surprised when that happens. So someone was saying here that Helen runs DA with an iron fist and Paul's routinely not part of those meetings. I can speak about the delegation from ActionSA. There's two platforms. There's a technical meeting where our national chair attends on our behalf. There's the technical meeting reports to the National Coalition Group meeting, where a delegation from our side is the following. It's John, myself, Michael, and Funzi, depending on if it's a City of Johannesburg related matter or not. So if it's a Tshwane matter, the caucus leader of Tshwane would be the fourth person. Ekurhuleni, there would be the fourth person. So we've been routinely part of these conversations. At times I'm unable to attend, I've got party responsibilities, but the team is there and we've canvassed and we've taken a view. It's really unfortunate. I think had it been left to Mayampo, we'd still be having a coalition government in Johannesburg. But unfortunately, Cape Town made a decision. In fact, our colleague Funzi can tell you what happened on the day when they'd asked for an adjournment when they were voting for the speaker. The DA asked for an adjournment and what then transpired between the adjournment and coming back to council, which the story the DA will not tell anybody, which we're going to tell today. So from our side, Kenny did approach myself and the national chair at the Johannesburg Council, and they did request a meeting between this week sometime. They obviously said we can't meet then because they've taken a position, but they would be interested in having talks later. And the chair would pursue those talks, but he can respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if I may hand over to Funzi on the subject that Bongani was mentioning, but also the question of what life under the ANC means in the city of Johannesburg.
Yeah. All right. No, thank you very much. So I'll answer the two questions, and particularly, taking on what Bongani has just indicated. So there is a candidate that we all agreed we're going to vote for now. For the speaker. It's now Alex Christian of the DA. After obviously they had then decided to do away with their first candidate who was still Vasco da Gama. So we go to council, but we know that PA is not supporting. So the DA then calls a caucus break. And we go and meet. And members of the DA leadership, the local, then start proposing to say, maybe we should consider what PA is asking for and all of you are asking for, which is an IFP speaker. So at that moment, the former mayor then steps out to go and request the national leadership of the DA to allow them to make this important decision that would have saved the coalition at that moment. Because all of us indeed wanted to save the coalition. And the reason why the local DA leadership called the caucus break was to find an 11th hour solution to this issue, which is something that we have been proposing, as Michael has indicated, for the entire month, to say, please give it to the IFP. So unfortunately, Mayor Palazzo was not listened to. And the national leadership of DA stuck to their decision and basically told all of us to go to hell. So that's what happened. And if you ask the interference from national leadership, Zianda, and I think Itumeleng as well mentioned it. That's an example of what happened. Of course, there are many other items that we have been battling with the DA on, which national leadership have not been really coming forth to assist us to stabilize our relationship. The issue of the deputy mayor in the city of Johannesburg, it is there in the coalition agreement, and it's supposed to be assigned to ActionSA. But for the past 9 months, we have been writing formal letters to the DA, reminding them of this commitment, asking them that this matter needs to be fast-tracked so that we can be able to have a deputy mayor as agreed in the coalition agreement. Up until we decided to say maybe we should do a motion in council to pressurize them to fulfill on their commitment. And that motion was coming to council now in October. It was already in the process. But this is one of many issues that we have battled with them, which unfortunately the executive mayor could not move without obviously the approval of national leadership. Peter, you're asking how do we see Joburg under ANC? Look, from our point of view is that we are going to provide a very constructive opposition. In fact, we want to pass this message to the new mayor, Dada Morero, to say the 3 MMC for ActionSA are available to do a handover report. We are available to give them what we were busy with, the programs that we were busy with, and we are available to ask them to say, please continue with these programs. The budget is approved. You can only change 10% of that budget in January. Only 10% can be able to be amended. Otherwise, they'll have to drive this budget for the whole year. So we are available to give them a handover report and so that they can be able to implement some of the programs that we were busy implementing. So we don't want to prejudge them. We know ANC's failures, the 28 years that we are in, and the load shedding and all other failures. We don't want to repeat them. We all know them. But we want to give them a chance and maybe an opportunity, a space to prove us wrong. And that is why we are giving them all the material. A handover report will be ready so that they can be able to assist our residents in ensuring that service delivery is not interrupted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fonzie. Let's move all of the stuff again. We need to find a better system for this one day. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Okay, thank you. There are a few questions there that I think I would just like to respond to because they just relate to things that are happening at the national level of these organizations presently. And I think to Zianda's question, but ActionSA could have saved the mayor of Joburg. I think ActionSA couldn't have done another thing. If you look in reflection, ActionSA could not have done more. I think the first thing is we must recognize that our proposal to stabilize coalition was about saving the mayor of Johannesburg. Because when a stable government can operate for the full 5-year term, who benefits from that? It's the mayor. Politically, you can have MMCs who are delivering services, but the mayor is the one who derives the most benefit from these arrangements. And this is what so many of the coalition partners were trying to tell the DA. Give a little to take a lot. That's really all it involved. So that's what that proposal was about in the first place. But as Bongani has indicated, even when we could not achieve consensus with that proposal, in other words, every party in the agreement other than the DA agreed with that proposal. Even when there was no consensus because the DA said no, we said, all right, that's fine. A coalition agreement has to work by consensus. It can only be changed when everyone agrees. So for that reason, we will give up on this argument and we will return to vote with the coalition, which is what we did. We voted with the coalition on every single occasion. And a lot has been spoken about the absence from council on the day of the motion of no confidence. And let's be honest with ourselves, the coalition called that meeting an illegal meeting. They are going to court now to have it overturned as an illegal meeting. And they are going to be successful, I believe. Because at the end of the day, a programming committee meeting was called. You have to have a programming committee meeting to assign work onto the agenda of council. And that meeting did not have a quorum. We can debate the purpose of that kind of legal challenge when the majority has been lost, which becomes an interesting point. But nonetheless, there's no question it was an illegal meeting. So ActionSA does not attend illegal meetings. In fact, it was discussed at length within the coalition that attending that meeting would be legitimizing a meeting that is illegal. But nonetheless, however you want to look at it, even those who went there was no vote against. There was 139 in favor of that motion. So whether people were there or whether people weren't was immaterial. The majority existed on the side that was removing the mayor and the speaker and installing ANC-aligned office bearers in that position. But I do not think ActionSA could have done any more in that circumstance. In fact, I would suggest we did a whole lot more than the DA to save Mpho Palatse. I also want to say a little word to our colleagues in the IFP. Not a lot of time is spent recognizing other political parties. They were the people who were going to be the speaker in Johannesburg. They had an outstanding candidate for speaker, Nonhlanhla Makuba. She was our MMC of Transport when Herman was mayor. An excellent person, experience in Parliament, an excellent choice by any measure. And when anyone has seen the chaos of a City of Johannesburg council meeting, the caliber of the person, the speaker, is critical, to say the absolute least. And when they didn't get their way, they still voted with the coalition, like us. And credit to the IFP, because I think they too were excellent coalition partners in this entire exercise. A lot of questions are then asked about what would we do if this party or that party wants to offer ActionSA anything. And I think, let me be very clear, ActionSA would find it very difficult to work with some of these parties in terms of being in the executive and co-governing together. It would be very, very difficult. But I need to be clear that we are having to engage this discussion at our Senate this week. I mentioned to you earlier in the hopes that I could protect myself from these questions, but I couldn't, I see. Because I can't stand here as the national chair and say, this is what ActionSA will do in coalitions. I don't possess the authority. Even Herman Mashaba as the president, we have to go to Senate and have these discussions as a body. Like any political party, these are decisions of structures, not as individuals. But I think the imperative is this, and I want us to just have a moment to talk about these things, is we need to have a re-look at the model of coalition in South Africa, because it's not working. There's too much instability. We have to look at the question of stability and how we can make these arrangements work. And I think from that perspective, we are going to have that engagement at the level of our Senate. But what I would also like to assure the residents of Johannesburg and the other metros in Gauteng and the South African people, through you, the media, is that you must remember ActionSA is an organization that is grounded in dialogue. That is how we were created. We weren't created because of the ambitions of individuals. We were created because a dialogue was formed in which 2.4 million South Africans entered their voice into what they want ActionSA in South Africa to be. And once again, when we engage in these conversations within our Senate, we will be engaging the South African people during the course of this week to ask them what they think should be done. Because I think there's just too much that is done within coalitions, about coalitions, that is not including the voices of the people that coalitions are meant to serve. And I think that's something that ActionSA particularly would like to address.
Is there another round? Thanks, Michael. All right. Oh, yes. Black people in the DA. How could we forget that question?
Fine. On the actual talks, when the issue of the speaker was being discussed.
Can I address that now while I've got all the infrastructure in front of me? Otherwise we have to move it all over again. So yes, indeed, thank you. I can tell you already that the coalition structure as it is right now is called a meeting for this evening. It's meeting tonight at 9 o'clock. I'm not entirely sure what is on its agenda, but you can only imagine the way forward in respect of the remaining two municipalities, and I suppose any legal challenge in the City of Johannesburg would be likely to be on its agenda. I think from an ActionSA standpoint, we need to use that meeting to say that it's time for the leaders of parties, of these different parties, to get together and to have a conversation about whether or not there's an appetite to resolve the problems that exist within this coalition. And for what it's worth, ActionSA is not afraid to introspect. If there's any extent to which anyone needs us to go back to the drawing board and re-examine how we are, ActionSA is available to do so. We don't believe that we are perfect. We have lots of humility, and we're willing to listen. But at the same time, for this to work, the leaders of other political parties have to confess to the same. And I'm afraid what we have seen of late is a tendency of it's not me, it's you, and a refusal to listen to what is going on in the coalition dynamic. And that's what we have to break through on, because the residents of Tshwane in particular will rely on that kind of conversation succeeding. Bongani?
Thank you. The question is, do I have sympathy for black leaders and members in the DA who are still there? Okay, there we go. No, I don't. I don't have sympathy. I don't have sympathy, and I'll tell you why. Because we are speaking about adults who have exercised their freedom of association, who have bought into a vision which they don't recognize that it has changed. And I can certainly make a bold statement about the Democratic Alliance that their only focus is the Western Cape. Had this municipality been in the Western Cape, they would have tried everything possible to ensure that there's stability here. So the people who are there, in fact, it's not just black people. The better question to ask is, do I have sympathy for the progressive people in Democratic Alliance? Even if you'd ask that question, I'll still tell you I don't. I don't have sympathy, because they choose to remain under the circumstance, and they are fooling themselves to believe that the DA has got any national agenda apart from a Western Cape agenda. So had this been Mayor Gordon Hill-Lewis in Johannesburg under the circumstances, I am telling you they would have given IFP that position to stabilize. Yeah. So I've got no sympathies for people who choose not to see what is happening in this case. So I hope I've answered your question without any ambiguities. We are very clear. What's happening where? In the DA? Well, look, I think, yeah, you must ask them. But for anybody with a decent pair of eyes who can read politics, it is very clear to me that one of Mpho mistakes is to argue with people who've got the birth certificate of Democratic Alliance. You can't be arguing with your Tony Leons, Mike Waters, and Helen Zille and contradict them in public and think you'll last there forever. So she started opening her grave when she started to contradict them, which she was right to do, by the way. Mpho is a real force, politically, that one, right? So she was doing good, but at the same time, she did not appreciate that her rise in prominence creates problems for her in the context of leadership of DA in the province and in the country. And she's also articulated aspirations to lead the Democratic Alliance. So the matriculant realized that, hey, here's a doctor coming. She must go down. But I'm just saying, those who have eyes can see this thing. And we sympathize with her. It's politics. She was really rising in prominence and starting to project a different view, or at least different view of the Democratic Alliance, appealing to people in a different way that many other people can't. And when you do so in that environment that I know all too well, you have Msimanga looking at you, who wants a premier candidate. You've got the Tshwane who doesn't want to be disturbed there. So she was stuck between a rock and a hard place between these two chaps. And what has happened, happened. And I'm also suggesting that the opinion piece by Msimanga, on the eve of such a crucial negotiation, that opinion piece of his, we got it at 9:30 in the evening. Our coalition meeting starts at 10 o'clock. Yeah. And where all of us have agreed that we are going to accept the DA's view on this and vote for the coalition. The meeting we had had before was at 6, and we agreed let's have another one at 10. At 6, all parties, including PA, were saying it's fine, we agree, let's move on. But when this thing became a reality, that people who are coming up with a suggestion to amend the contract as it has been amended twice already, now you characterize them as rent seekers, as minnows, as people driven by greed. So Solim Simang picked the perfect moment to deal with the Mayor Palatsi. I'm shy. That moment finished it. You see, that one opinion piece is what broke the coalition. Solim Simang did a fantastic job in this case to protect his position as a provincial leader of the DA. So I'm just saying, those of us who have eyes can see this thing. I don't know about everybody.
Thank you, Chairperson. Okay, I'll take this hand, I'll take you, ma'am, and I'll take you once more. Anyone else? I think I'm going to close it, if I may, after this round. Okay? Okay, I'll take... No, I'll take you in your turn. So please go ahead, sir. Please announce who you are and where you come from.
My name is Ekurhuleni. I'm from Soweto. I have two questions and a comment that I'd like to put to you. Firstly, what does a constructive opposition look like? How do you tell whether a constructive opposition is doing what it's supposed to do and is succeeding at it? The second question is that the personalities aside, the ActionSA NTA would be ideologically the most close, or at least historically, given the personalities that are on this table. You know, so it's so at least there is some kind of family resemblance at West. So sooner or later, you would have to sit down with them, you know, unless you can identify any other party that you think is closest to your vision, your outlook, and the kind of South Africa that would work if a coalition government were to be formed. Okay. And then my last...
Sorry, what is the question?
That you would have to sit with them at some point. If you do, what kind of times would you require for such a conversation to be had with the DA? Okay. My last is a statement that I'd like to put to you, that you seem to be very nice to Popalazi, almost separating her from her party. A cynic, which I'm not, would think that you are trying to woo her to... No, how would you respond to that?
So it is a question, not a statement.
It's a
No,
question.
I'm saying
It's a statement and a question.
Go ahead.
Nomas Mangosi from the Soweto. I wanted to ask, in terms of Tshwane, moving to Tshwane, about a month ago, more than a month ago, the mayor, Randall Williams, was sort of on the chopping block. ActionSA said they had a Randall Williams problem. Up until the coalition then decided, okay, in order to sort of find a way forward, let us investigate. 60 days.
Yes.
So just according to your understanding, your knowledge of that report, where are we in terms of that? At what stage is that investigation? And in the likelihood that it is not tabled or you guys do not receive it at the end of the 60-day period, what happens? Is just, yeah, more, it's likely that it won't, I don't know, just with the reports that have been not coming forward. So yeah, what happens at the end of that 60 days if the coalition does not have that?
Yeah. Greg, go ahead, sir.
Dada Muraro says that you are holding on information with regard to the allegations that some of the councillors were paid to remove the Gama. And then he says that the police, even themselves at the ANC, have requested ActionSA to submit that information, and you refuse, or you don't have that information. That's now they're taking you as ActionSA to court because you defend them. How do you respond to that?
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to find out, like you said, that how the DA is working with you was working with you in Joburg. What is the point of you working with them in Tshwane and Ekurhuleni if you already know that you're going to get the same results you're getting in Joburg? What would be the point of you actually working with them?
start with okay. All right. The first question is, what does a constructive coalition look like? I think tensions in any coalition will be a prominent currency. It will always be there. But members are able to persuade each other, find each other, and the issue is not about sustaining a party, but the issue is about sustaining the coalition. So we make continuous compromises about protecting and stabilizing the coalition, and there's a full appreciation of what is at stake. So you don't characterize inputs made by other members as illegal because we have not done it in a way that satisfies you or at the time which you would prefer it to. So those are the part of things that require, but coalitions require maturity. Because once we're in that room, and the mistake we often see is the tendency to respond in defense of a particular party when there's an objective view being made. So I think this process is really enriching the experience and the institution of coalitions in Gauteng with everything we are going through and the learnings we are picking up as well. And I certainly think over a period of time we'll be able to manage these much better. But I think the key part of managing coalition is what do you do when you've lost? Do you create instability? Do you create a mess and all of this uncertainty? And from our side, at least, we are saying there must be a smooth transition. We have accepted, let's hand over, let's empower those who are coming in, let's do handover reports, let's now immerse ourselves in our new role of being an opposition and be a formidable opposition from our side. Well, personalities aside, look, I don't think we are closer to the DA. The national chair is the one who is seized with various conversations as and when there's a requirement, and more so about the two other governments that are still in place because they are trying to think about that. But as we have said, the DA being the
lines, I think there needs to be. And when ActionSA says we're going to review our position in coalition, that means by reviewing it with everyone, including the Democratic Alliance. So if the Democratic Alliance would like to approach that conversation from a point of view of maturity, recognizing what has gone wrong in this process and seeing how things can be repaired, then ActionSA will always be available for that conversation. It is most certainly a very important conversation. I think just to address something else about this ideological resemblance story, we need to knock that one on the head right away. There is a lot of people who like to draw that line, but I think we must identify that there's a huge difference between what people say about themselves and what they really are. From an ActionSA standpoint, the differences between us and the Democratic Alliance are very large, and you don't have to look very far to look at the difference in the support of the two political parties across different communities in South Africa to recognize that there's a very different offering and a very different constituency, which is fundamentally another point why it was so important that these co-governance arrangements included different political parties, because which is the DA's constituency in Johannesburg? And when they have the positions of Mayor, Speaker and Chief Whip, how do other constituencies get served as well? And this becomes an important point for how we conceive of coalitions. Norma, in terms of Tshwane, we took a very deliberate decision because we maintain that there is a Randall Williams problem in Tshwane. But it was very important in dealing with that problem that we ourselves did not do what we accused the DA of doing and act unilaterally. We're part of a coalition and we need to be humble. So what we did is we communicated our problems with the South African people so that was made clear. And we went to the coalition and said, what should we do? And the coalition said, let's investigate. And there are two separate investigations. There was firstly an investigation into whether or not the mayor had breached the coalition agreement. I note of late people are very serious about breaching the coalition agreement, so I look forward to that seriousness being applied in this particular investigation, because if people would like to talk about breaches, that was an enormous breach of the agreement. And there must be a determination as to how severe that breach was, and when you consider how it ended up in the public domain, it was very severe in our view. That needs to be presented to a meeting of the National Coalition this weekend, and we are committed to make sure that happens. In addition to that, there was a second investigation that was going to be commissioned through a legal firm that would determine whether or not there was breaches of the law as it related to the procurement processes. And we have a very strong opinion in that regard, and we're very confident that any legal investigation into that question will be producing such clarity in its outcome. And that deadline is for the end of October. And what you can be assured of from an ActionSA standpoint is that we don't keep people in office when they are doing the wrong things. So if it is found that wrong things were done there in terms of the law, in terms of the coalition agreement, not only will ActionSA act, but the coalition has given its assurance that it will act collectively with us in that regard. And that is something that we think is very important in this process. I think the only other question then that I identified was from Lunga. You're asking the questions that we're going to talk about in our Senate. The point is we do remain in a coalition in the city of Tshwane. And it's very important for us to address this question from the point of view of residents. Now, we have some very serious concerns in the city of Tshwane. You might have seen a press statement we sent yesterday where we're not even talking about this issue of this Kratos report. But you would have seen a press statement we've sent about the Rooival wastewater treatment plant. It's a very serious issue because a forensic report is now on the floor of council for the fifth time. On 4 occasions, that report has been blocked through disruptions and other methods. And what that report says is that that process was highly illegal. It's been reported in the news. I'm not breaking news, it's already there. And that process has been publicly defended for how long? It's a 15-year human rights tragedy where the people of Rooival and the people of Hammanskraal are paying for sewage water that is not safe for animal consumption. Agriculture has been destroyed in that part of the world. These are very serious issues, and we need to engage our coalition partners, including the Democratic Alliance, to see whether there's an appetite to resolve these problems in the kind of way that places the agenda of our residents first. And I think that is as much as I can possibly say at this point in time, because we must give them the opportunity. I can tell you right now, ActionSA is a reasonable party. If people come to us and they recognize these problems and they put in place real solutions to address them, we'll respond in kind. We are about this issue. We have fought for this issue since 2019, non-stop. That issue has to be resolved. What is the point of being in government if you can't resolve the issues that you raised when you were campaigning? Then you've got to ask yourself, what are you doing?
I think Funzi can take this one. Dada talking about information that we're holding on to with regards to bribery investigation.
Yeah, no, firstly, Peter, let me be clear that he has not spoken to us. But Dada is now the mayor, you know. When you are the mayor, you are called your worship. So you must stop being playful. He's now the mayor. He must take his role very seriously and stop playing games. If he wants to speak to us, he know how to reach me. Then we can talk. But allegations, when they are reported, they are left to the law enforcement agencies to investigate them. He has not spoken to us, but the point I want to make is that he must not be playful. I heard him the other day saying the multi-party government has taken the city back by 100 years. We have been in government for 9 months. He says we have taken this city back for 100 years. I mean, that's really playful. And he needs to now take his role seriously. He's the mayor. We want to play a constructive opposition role there. And we want to work with those that are progressive, that wants to champion the service delivery for all our residents in the city. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, colleagues. I think that brings this conference to a close. Thank you always for being responsive. Thank you to the leadership of ActionSA. I think the issues are clear. If you have any further questions, you know how to reach us. Please do that, and we will be responsive. Thank you very much.
Guy doesn't. I mean, that's